Welcome back for this second part of the retrospective of Chow Yun-Fat. Last time we left him, it was in the middle of 1987. He had just finished doing Flaming Brothers. We will keep following him in this year 1987 with a very important film for him, which was An Autumn's Tale, directed by Mabel Chung. So An Autumn's Tale was an interesting story because that's basically some kind of variation on the first film that Mabel Chung had done, which was The Illegal Immigrant. Also a film dealing with a love story set in New York between two Chinese a bit lost in this environment. And An Autumn's Tale is basically the same concept but done in a more commercial way, with a bit more with more star power, with more budget, with more comedy and less drama. It's worth to note that actually the part Chow Yun-Fat plays, it was tailor-made for him. The director Mabel Chung really wanted him for the part, but originally he was not supposed to appear in the film. He was supposed to act alongside Michelle Yeoh in Magnificent Warrior, but John Cham, the producer, agreed with Mabel Chung that he was probably a better fit for An Autumn's Tale rather than Magnificent Warrior, so he agreed for him to play in An Autumn's Tale. An Autumn's Tale is considered as a cult classic in Hong Kong. It was a big success. It's still nowadays considered as one of the best romantic comedy of Hong Kong cinema, and it's a worthy title because that's indeed a very good film. Chow Yun-Fat plays a character which at first is not that sympathetic. It's a bit obnoxious, a bit annoying, but that's exactly the part, the way his character is made, and that's the trick in order for us to appreciate the development of the character, to learn to know him better through the eyes of Cherry Chung being the main character, with a girl stranded in New York when she wanted to see her boyfriend, and she realized he had actually broken up with her. And so she finds some comfort, even if it's pretty difficult at first, with this character played by Chow Yun-Fat. It's a very nice film, well shot, very, very tender, very well directed, with really great performances from both Chow Yun-Fat and Cherry Chung. When it comes to the romantic comedy aspect of Chow Yun-Fat's career, An Autumn's Tale is without a doubt in the top 3, probably even top 1. So it's really worth check it if you haven't yet. It's a very good film, very good Chow Yun-Fat's performance. So it's a must-have in the collection of any Chow Yun-Fat's lover. I cannot say the same thing for the following film he did, another film of 1987, and that's the Romancing Star by Wong Ting. So you are probably aware of what Wong Ting films are. They are usually very lowbrow comedy, a mix of everything in order to please as many people as possible. The Romancing Star basically kickstarted the trend for Wong Ting of this kind of films, a bit based on the model of the Lucky Star series, with a group of guys trying to chase girls. He has done a lot of them during the mid-80s to the end of the 80s, and this one basically kickstarted this trend for him. So we have Chow Yun-Fat, we have Stanley Fung, we have Eric Tsang, and we have Nat Chan playing this group of friends who want to woo several girls, and the main one being Maggie Cheung, a young Maggie Cheung, so not the Maggie Cheung which you may be very familiar with. That's more the amateur Maggie Cheung, the one who didn't really know how to act. And so of course that's the one which Chow Yun-Fat is chasing after. The film for Wong Ting comedy, it's not that bad actually. It's actually pretty okay for his standards, I would say. In part because of the casting, in part because there are a couple of comedy scenes which are indeed funny, and also because it was made very quickly after A Better Tomorrow, so you have a lot of references and parody of A Better Tomorrow in the film. And if you like A Better Tomorrow, that makes it an extra kick, an extra laugh, and that really makes it better. You also have a couple of chase scenes which are well done. That was nothing groundbreaking for mid-80s Hong Kong action scene, Hong Kong chase scene standards, but you can expect something well handled. Probably not by Wong Ting, probably directly by the guy in charge of that, but that's for the best. So for a Wong Ting comedy, Romancing Star is actually okay. If you are looking for a good film on normal, regular standards, that may not be that, but be aware of what you are going to get before watching it. Romancing Star was a success and it led to 2 sequels. But Chow Yun-Fat didn't really appear in any of them. He did a very small cameo in the second one, and he appeared indirectly in the third one through a footage from the first film, which was used in the third one. So a bit one of those tricky Wong Ting way of saying that Chow Yun-Fat is in the film, but he was not really. So when it comes to the Romancing Star series, the first one, of course, is the best. But once again, that's the best on the Wong Ting scale of film rating. So be aware once again. Still in '87, he appeared in Brotherhood, a film directed by Billy Chan, a former Bruce Lee and Sammo Hung stuntman. Brotherhood is basically a riff, a variation on the heroic bloodshed trend, which A Better Tomorrow had started the year before. But it's actually a clever one because it doesn't really copy the thing. It takes all the ingredients you can expect of the genre, but then it twists it and bring the story in another direction. And for this reason, I think the Brotherhood is actually interesting. It's a B movie, it's not a big budget, so don't expect anything that groundbreaking, but it's certainly worth checking, and especially if you like heroic bloodshed and if you are ready to see heroic bloodshed being twisted, being brought in the other directions that what you can expect of the genre. When it comes to Chow Yun-Fat himself, his part is actually very small. It's really just basically a supporting part. He's doing okay, but there is really nothing memorable from him in the film. So check Brotherhood because it is a good film, but don't expect anything special from Chow Yun-Fat. He really did it just for the money as a supporting part. 1987 continue with Scared Stiff. Scared Stiff is a film directed by Lau Kar-wing for Cinema City. Scared Stiff is really the kind of crazy Hong Kong cinema as we like it, meaning with everything but the kitchen sink. You really have any ingredient they could put in this film. There is a bit of horror, there is a bit of fantasy, a bit of comedy, a bit of action, a bit of love story. I mean, you really have everything in this film, and this kind of approach is usually a hit or miss. And Scared Stiff is an example of a good one, of a good big mess Hong Kong film. It's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable. You will never get bored watching the film. So on this aspect, it's really a successful film in this specific, very Hong Kong style genre, if we can call it as a genre. But it's especially worth noting if you are a Chow Yun-Fat fan, because that's one of the very rare films where he's playing the bad guy. And he's doing it well. He's actually very convincing as it. As is the bad guy is not the main focus of the film. I mean, he comes a bit later. It's mostly a Miu Qiu Eric Tsang show, but still, Chow Yun-Fat is quite memorable in it. So it's really a worthy add to your collection, or at least a worthy watch if you want to keep binge watching Chow Yun-Fat's career. 87, we will probably never escape this year. That was really one of the most active years for Chow Yun-Fat, as you can see. And he did another diptych, another duo of films called Rich and Famous and Tragic Hero. So they are heroic bloodshed films, really films trying to follow the trend of A Better Tomorrow. Both films were actually made at the same time, and that's really weird, because I personally think that Rich and Famous is pretty bad, but I think Tragic Hero is actually quite enjoyable. And I cannot explain, I cannot get why, when doing the same film, when shooting everything at the same time, they end up with one film good and one film bad. I actually interviewed quite a few people who have worked on the film, on both films, and never really got a clear explanation of why one ended up being good and one ended up being bad. But whatever. The film is especially worthy for the cast. I mean, the cast is a 4-star cast. You have Karina Lowe, you have Alex Mann, you have Andy Lau, you have Alan Tam. Well, this one is a bit of a weak link, but anyway, he's there. You have Chow Yun-Fat. It was actually the concept of the film was to have the most star-studded cast possible, and it's there. I mean, you really see it, and it adds some gravity, it adds some weight on the film. Having said that, as I said, the film is a mixed bag. I mean, Rich and Famous is pretty bad, and Tragic Hero is pretty good. When it comes to Rich and Famous, there is really a scene which for me represents the failure of the film. That's a scene where Chow Yun-Fat has to shoot some bad guys, and he is seated in a small crappy van, and the director is really trying to make him look heroic. So you have the slow motion, you have the heroic style music, but at the same time you see him in this very crappy van on a crappy stool, shooting and with his Uzi. So there is some kind of contrast between what is on the picture and what the direction, what the mise en scène is trying to say, and for me that really represents the failure of the film. On the other hand, Tragic Hero has some pretty good scenes, and especially the final. The final is a big shootout, a big gunfight in a villa, and this one is really well done. It's really an impressive piece of action. So for this reason alone, you should at least watch Tragic Hero. I would actually advise you to watch Tragic Hero first, and if you really like it, then you can try your chance with Rich and Famous. The other way around, I mean, it will work, but if you end up not liking Rich and Famous, which should be the case, don't give up. Go for Tragic Hero and watch it, because that's actually the best one of the two. And at last, the last film for the year 1987 for Chow Yun-Fat, and it's a classic of Hong Kong cinema, that's City on Fire. Well, City on Fire, I mean, I think everybody, all of you know about it. It has inspired Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. That was basically the start of Ringo Lam's career as an author when it comes to cops and robber films. It's a classic. It's a classic of Hong Kong cinema. It's basically the story of an undercover cop who is completely lost in his job. He doesn't know anymore who he can trust, if has he become really a gangster? Is he still a cop? So he's completely doubting about his allegiance and his situation, his status. You have a very interesting film noir, jazzy atmosphere, which was not something that common in Hong Kong cinema back then, and remains fairly unique. You have strong performances from all the cast, and especially Chow Yun-Fat, of course, is extremely convincing as this character who is completely lost, who doesn't know anymore, who has lost his moral compass, and who doesn't know anymore who he should trust, what he should do. Obviously, it's a must-have, a must-watch for any Hong Kong cinema fan, and of course for any Chow Yun-Fat fan. At last, we escape 1987 and we enter 1988 with a comedy called The Greatest Lover, which was directed by Clarence Fock. The Greatest Lover is basically a My Fair Lady Hong Kong style. So Chow Yun-Fat is playing a mainlander who arrives in Hong Kong, who just arrived in Hong Kong, and is going to be groomed in order to be able to navigate in the Hong Kong high society. Why not? I mean, it's not such a bad concept. Unfortunately, the film is pretty disappointing in my opinion. The comedy is quite lowbrow. It's not very... There is not much when it comes to the message, despite having the potential being there. It's nothing really memorable. Chow Yun-Fat is in comedy mode, so he's a bit overacting sometimes, but that was the way back then. It's not a problem per se. I mean, if you really are a fan of Chow Yun-Fat, you can watch the film, but don't expect anything great. He's doing the job, but he has done better comedy than that, so it's probably not worth checking that much. Of course, he could not escape the popularity of the heroic bloodshed genre, so he had to act in a couple of other films in this style. And one of them was City War, directed by Sun Chung, who was a veteran from the Shaw Brothers, and that's one of the few films he did after he left. That's one of the few films he did after the studio closed its doors in 1985. City War is interesting in a way that it reunites the duo of Tick-Lung and Chow Yun-Fat. But in this case, Tick-Lung is playing some kind of hard-boiled cop, while Chow Yun-Fat is more the suave one. I would say in a way Tick-Lung is the old style, 60s, 70s style cop, a bit rough, while Chow Yun-Fat is the more modern 80s, 90s cop, which is more educated compared to his former counterpart. The film is a fairly good heroic bloodshed style film. It's not the best one there have been. I mean, in the exploitation genre, of course, not compared to the John Woo ones. Some action fans are a bit annoyed by a very long middle part of the film where it's mostly a romance between Chow Yun-Fat and Tien Nhu, if my memory is correct. I don't mind it. I think it's okay to have some variations on the formula, and to have a romantic relationship was becoming kind of the norm back then. It's okay. I mean, it's well done enough. You have a very good supporting cast with a young Michael Cho and of course a great Norman Chu playing the bad guy, and you have some pretty impressive action scenes, especially the final as usual, and a few very mean stuff that you find only in Hong Kong films. I don't want to spoil it, so you will see it by yourself. But on that, it has some common points with Flaming Brothers also, which had a similar, very cruel scene. So if you like heroic bloodshed, of course you should watch it. Chow Yun-Fat is doing okay. That's not his best performance in any way, but he is doing the job. I think at that point he was starting to get a bit tired of this hero character, and he probably enjoyed more the romantic part of the film. But anyway, he's okay in it, and the film is okay, so certainly worth a watch. He also did a comedy for Chow Yun, another veteran of Hong Kong cinema who had worked for Cantonese cinema and then moved to Shaw Brothers, and then did a couple more films after the studio closed its door, and that's Diary of a Big Man. Diary of a Big Man is actually one of the best films Chow Yun did after the end of the Shaw Brothers. He actually didn't do many, but Diary of a Big Man is without a doubt his best one. It's a comedy in which Chow Yun-Fat has two girlfriends, and he doesn't manage to choose between the two, so he ends up marrying both of them at the same time, and so he has to manage the planning, of course, because none of the girls know the existence of the other girl, so he has to juggle between the two, trying to make them believe that they are the only girl he has in his life. It's a very fast-paced film, as we can expect from a Triads production. The film had actually a couple of difficulties during the production because Triads was not satisfied by the way Chow Yun was handling some comedy scenes. It's a very funny comedy, very fast-paced, as I said, and that's really for the best. That's basically what you can expect from a good Hong Kong comedy. Very fast, very inventive, with a Chow Yun-Fat who is giving 100%. I mean, he's always on the move. He's always doing something. A bit overacting sometimes, but that fits the spirit of the film. Of course, there is a memorable, there is a very good musical scene, which is very funny, which is very inspired. The film is really a nice comedy worth checking. 88 saw also Chow Yun-Fat act in Tiger on the Beat, directed by Lau Kar-leung. So we talk about, it seems like 88 was the year for Chow Yun-Fat of working with veterans of the industry who had left the Shaw Brothers. And that's the case here once again with Lau Kar-leung. So Lau Kar-leung, I guess you probably are familiar with him. He was the director of the 36th Chamber of Shaolin and many other great Kung Fu films. He's basically the greatest Kung Fu film director ever. And he was making with Tiger on the Beat his transition to more modern action film. He was actually one of the latest of this action director, Kung Fu director, to do this transition. Sammo Hung, Jackie Chan, Yuen Woo-ping, they all had done it before him, and he was a bit late to the party. But he actually did a good job with Tiger on the Beat. It's an action comedy where, with a buddy movie formula, with Chow Yun-Fat playing this relaxed, a bit funny cop, having to team with Conan Lee being the hard-boiled one and more the action-oriented one. And they have to protect some kind of important witness in order to get some gangsters arrested. As you can expect from a movie directed by such a very important action filmmaker, the scenes are really well done. You have some chase, you have some gunfights, you have a bit of fist fight. So you have the whole palette you can expect from such a film. Especially noteworthy is the final with the chainsaw duel between Gordon Liu and Conan Lee. It's a very nice piece of action. You also have some very creative way of handling the gunfight when it comes to Chow Yun-Fat fighting the bad guys. There are some interesting ideas there, thanks to Lau Kar-leung and his team. You also have some of the worst guai-lo ever in any Hong Kong film. So for all these reasons, it's a very recommended Chow Yun-Fat film. Which is not something I'm going to say about the next film, which is The Eighth Happiness, directed by Johnny To. So The Eighth Happiness was produced by Raymond Wong, and it was a New Year film. Back then, Raymond Wong had started this formula for Chinese New Year film of having several couples arguing, and at the end, of course, they would reunite. And so you would have Eighth Happiness is a bit the start of this formula, and it's a very generic, very bland formula in my opinion, and it's really slightly boring, I would say. The film is directed by Johnny To, but that doesn't say much because back then Johnny To was basically the yes man for Raymond Wong, and Johnny To in the first place has never been very good with comedy. So Eighth Happiness is, in my opinion, one of the is a very hard to swallow comedy. It's very obnoxious in my opinion. Chow Yun-Fat is playing some kind of effeminate characters, which I guess is some inside joke related to the gay in Hong Kong, which is obviously offensive nowadays. But even back then, I don't think it was very neither tasteful, neither funny. So the film was a big success, and some people remember Chow Yun-Fat for it. I mean, it's considered as a cult classic for some. I disagree with that. I think it's pretty bad. So I would not recommend the film. I would not recommend it, and I don't think Chow Yun-Fat in it is very likable either. So don't bother, in my opinion. We move to 1989 on another Wong Ting film. This one is considered as a cult classic once again, and that's God of Gamblers. And once again, I may be in the minority because I don't think that's a very good film actually. The gambling part of the film is okay, the action part is okay as well, but there is a big middle part in which Chow Yun-Fat is basically doing Rain Man, He has lost his memory, he's only eating chocolate. And I really find this part of the film pretty bad. And it drags on. The film has a good reputation, so maybe you should check it anyway, but I would really not recommend it. It's a very mixed bag. Chow Yun-Fat is classy when he's doing this god of gambler character, yes, that's true, but the rest of the film is not that impressive in my opinion. It's actually pretty bad, so not a Chow Yun-Fat I would recommend actually. The same year, it was also in A Better Tomorrow 3, the sequel directed by Triads. So there are a lot of stories about how the movie came to be, with the argument between John Woo and Triads. I won't go into that. Just the film is not very good. It's certainly the weakest of the three. I think it's interesting if you are interested in Triads as a director, because there are a lot of biographical elements in it. But otherwise, as a Better Tomorrow sequel, that's not a very good film. Chow Yun-Fat is outshined by Anita Mui, which is not that surprising as Triads likes to work more on his female characters. He's doing the job. I mean, he's serviceable. He's doing what he has to do, and he's trying to show another aspect of the character of Mark, which is not a bad thing per se, but it's not that convincing in my opinion. Still, it's decent. I mean, there are some interesting attempts. There are some elements which makes it worth watching, but neither one of the best performance of Chow Yun-Fat, neither one of his best film. Chow Yun-Fat worked with Triads in this year in 1989, but he also worked with John Woo on one of the most famous Hong Kong film ever, that is of course The Killer. The Killer, I mean, everybody knows about it, the story of a killer played by Chow Yun-Fat, who has made a singer blind and who tries to help her, and who of course develop a romantic relation with her, and who also befriend with the cop who is chasing him. Actually, when I worked on my Triads biography, I had to rewatch The Killer, and for a long time I was always considering that A Better Tomorrow was the best John Woo film. I still think it's one of his best. It's certainly a top 3 film, and I was thinking that maybe I'm going to find The Killer a bit old-fashioned, a bit outdated. But actually, when I rewatched it for working on the book, I was once again blown away. I mean, clearly you see John Woo at his best. There is a reason that the film is so much highly considered, that it had such an impact. It's really a masterpiece. There is no doubt there. And Chow Yun-Fat is at its peak also as this John Woo style hero. He really mastered it, as you can expect from someone who has played this kind of part several times already. But here he doesn't feel like he's tired of it. He's really able to take the mantle of this genre, of this character, of this hero with a dark fate. He's really perfect in it. The film is perfect in many ways, so of course that's a must for anybody who is watching this video and who hasn't watched it yet. 89 was actually a pretty good year for Chow Yun-Fat when it comes to his selection of film, because he also acted in another film, in several films which were really quality works. One of them was Triads: The Inside Story, directed by Taylor Wong. Taylor Wong is an interesting director, not necessarily for the good reasons, because he was actually someone who had always very good concepts, but who was always failing in the execution, in the shooting and in the editing part of his works. Having said that, I think Triads: The Inside Story is actually one of his best work. It's basically Chow Yun-Fat playing an everyday man who ends up at the head of a triad. He didn't want it, he didn't plan it, and he didn't like it. And he doesn't like it. But he has to deal with it. He has to deal with the responsibilities and the consequences that bring a crime syndicate. And it's very interesting because Chow Yun-Fat is really able to express the distress of the character of someone who doesn't want to be a bad guy, and it goes against this image of these gangsters who are positive figure. Here it's clearly shown that they are not positive. They have also their own set of values and they are not necessarily all bad, but at the end of the day it's still doing crime, it's still exploiting and abusing other people, and that's something that the character of Chow Yun-Fat doesn't want to do, and so he will try to make the crime syndicate evolve into something a bit more legal, into something a bit more acceptable. And that's actually something which was happening also in organized crime all over the world around that time, in the Yakuza, in the Italian mafia. They were all trying to become a bit more legal, to have some legal front. So sometimes most of them were actually not doing it for the virtuous reason of Chow Yun-Fat's character. Many of them were doing it just as a front in order to get more influence and in order to launder dirty money. But still that was something happening, and some of them indeed managed to cross into legality this way. So this film illustrates this phenomena, and it does it fairly well. And Chow Yun-Fat is extremely good as this character who doesn't want to be in this situation. So for all this reason, it's really a recommended film in his filmography, which is, in my opinion, a bit forgotten. So check it if you can. And another high-quality work is All About Along, directed by Johnny To. So that's the time Johnny To really started to take his independence from Remo Wong. It was produced by Remo Wong, but he was able to develop the story himself. It's a drama, father-son story. Chow Yun-Fat is a racer, is a bike racer who has to take care of his child following the divorce of his wife, played by Sylvia Chang. And there is all this difficult bonding happening between him and his son. It's very touching. It's very dramatic on some aspects, and the whole technical aspect of the film is very good. You have Chow Yun-Fat, of course, being really strong performance here as this father who will learn to be responsible toward his son, and you have also Sylvia Chang, who is, as you can expect, always very good. You have Mantat, you have a very good soundtrack which really helps to bring the human drama in the story, and Johnny To is actually quite inspired in his direction as well. So you have really this combination of factors which makes it one of the very best 80s drama from Hong Kong cinema back then. So if you haven't watched it, you should really watch it, and you will see another aspect of Chow Yun-Fat, not the action hero, not the comedy guy, but the dramatic actor, and he's really convincing, he's really strong in this aspect as well. Two more films for 1989. One of them is another collaboration with his good friend Ringo Lam, and it's Wide Search. It's a remake of Peter Weir's Witness with Harrison Ford. Peter Weir is a very good director, but Witness is not his best work in my opinion, and the same can be said of Ringo Lam, because Wide Search is not his best work, but it's fairly serviceable. He did it with clearly more commercial ambitions compared to the film he had done before, which was School on Fire, which had led to a lot of critics and a lot of flack for him. So he was trying to do something a bit more consensual, a bit more commercial, a bit more mainstream there. On that attempt, it's a success. The duo, of course, the couple of Cherry Chung and Chow Yun-Fat is as touching as you can expect. At this point, they were really used to work with each other, so they really work very well together. The film managed to bring a different atmosphere to a classical cop and gangster stories, thanks to this location in the new territory in this small village. That brings a different flavor to it compared to other cops and gangster stories, and that's well handled by Ringo Lam. It's not the best of his work, it's not the best of Chow Yun-Fat's performance, but it's well done. It's done with professionalism from everyone involved. So for this reason, that's still a recommendation in my book. And we will finish this video by a film made in 1990. That was another Chinese New Year film. That was another film produced by Raymond Wong and directed by Johnny To, The Fun, the Luck and the Tycoon. And as usual, as you can expect from Raymond Wong, that's actually inspired from another work, in this case being Coming to America or Going to America, not completely sure of the title in English, by John Landis. So it's basically the same story. Someone very rich who, in order to woo the girl he likes, has to pretend to be poor and in order to work alongside the girl he likes. Johnny To comedy produced by Raymond Wong, so don't expect anything great. If we have to compare it to other offerings by the same group of individuals, like the Eighth Happiness, I think The Fun, the Luck and the Tycoon is better, but that doesn't mean it's a great film. It's a serviceable comedy. I guess it's decent. I mean, it's not badly done, but it's really nothing outstanding. The most noteworthy aspect of the film, in my opinion, is that Chow Yun-Fat seems very happy to be in the film. He always has a smile on his face during the whole film, always smiling, always laughing. So I guess he really had a good time, or he enjoyed the check that Raymond Wong did for him. I'm not sure which one it was, but in any case, if you want to see Chow Yun-Fat being happy, this film is a great choice. If you want to see a good comedy, maybe you better check something like Diary of a Big Man. That's on this film we are going to end the second part of the Chow Yun-Fat retrospective. I will find you back with the third part in 1 month, where we will cover the rest of his filmography. Until then, keep watching Hong Kong films, keep watching Chow Yun-Fat films, and see you very soon.